Hey everybody, it's Jason Blahas here, and once again it is time for the Q&As, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, can you please cover the topic of weightlifting and arterial stiffness? Several recent studies have shown that long-term weightlifting causes arterial stiffness. This is a known risk factor for cardiac disease. Is this arterial stiffness benign because it was caused by healthy activities as opposed to being caused by being obese, hypertensive, diabetic, etc.? You know what, that's a great question, and actually I've seen studies going back as far as 1999, so not even that recent discussing this, and what they note in a lot of the studies is that there's kind of a paradox there because weightlifting in general has been associated very, very strongly with reduced mortality. It has been also associated with extended life and extended quality of life, meaning your quality of life stays much, much higher, much later in life if you routinely resistance train. So it's kind of a paradox there that they find this correlation with arterial stiffness. Now, what's interesting enough, there are other forms of exercise, particularly, various forms of cardio endurance work, which reduce arterial stiffness. So I would suggest to you that because weight training in general has some health factors that get worse, but overall it dramatically improves your lifespan and quality of life, that the few things that it does cause that are negative can be reversed with other activities, and in this case namely cardiovascular training. If you do enough endurance work or cardio work, it should go ahead and offset and reverse those negative effects and improve them. So people who do pretty large amounts of cardio, reasonable levels of cardio, are going to have still better arterial stiffness than the average person, even if they weightlift. So your solution to this problem is to make sure you're doing plenty of cardio. If you want to have good cardiovascular health, you need to do cardio in addition to your weight training, even though weight training has in other areas, it offers benefits for health and longevity that other activities simply cannot accomplish. You still need to be doing your cardio. All right, next question. Hey Jason, thought maybe you can explain a bit more on how to do one set per body part workouts like you in order to get in and out of the gym ASAP, including stuff like how many reps are optimal, how to deal with plateaus, etc. And also, will this be enough volume for legs working out 3 times a week? Alright, there's simply no way to answer most of your question in one video because how many reps should you do? How should you deal with plateaus? Things like that. These are things I have an individual series of videos discussing. This isn't something you can cover all here because the same rules that apply to multi-set or even higher volume training are still going to apply to all of these rules. You're probably going to need to periodize a little bit. You're probably going to need to do deloads. You're probably going to need to back off every now and then. You're also going to have times where you might want to do extended sets like rest pause training and things. So it's not a one size fit all thing when you're talking about coming in and doing one set. However, one thing that I will say is that because you are only doing one set, you will probably do much better, particularly if you're a drug-free lifter or even a very modestly enhanced lifter, if you do full body when you do these. Because again, you're only doing one set, you need to include every exercise that you think that you need to hit all the important body parts. Meaning, yeah, you could come in and you could base it upon doing a squat, deadlift, push press, and weighted chin-ups and weighted dips, and you could come in and do one set of all 5 of those exercises, and that will cover all your bases. But you probably need to do some stuff for your weak points also, meaning if your biceps are still a weak link in there, you might want to do a set of curls. If your side delts are still a weak point and all of that, you might want to do a set for those in there. So what you need to understand is that since you're training such low volume, you need to capitalize on full body programs, their ability to increase protein synthesis and everything, and make sure that you're hitting every muscle that you want to grow with something very effective. 1, maybe even 2 exercises for it, again, due to the very, very low volume per exercise. And I'm not even saying you can't rotate through exercises day to day as long as all your bases are covered, and particularly all of your weak points, both whether it's size-wise or even athletically. You need to make sure that your weak points get worked effectively every single time that you train if you want to utilize this type of training system. That's just the way to approach it. But remember, as far as the other things go, you're still going to need to utilize possible periodization, deloads, weight resets, all sorts of things. Those things don't go away as far as determining how to deal with plateaus and everything just because you're only doing one set. All right, next question. Greetings, Jason. Could you explain how to properly carb up for a photo shoot or show please give some tips for a drug-free person who wants to look as full and dry as possible. If you could be so kind, please talk about water, sodium, carbs, and fat manipulation on specific days before event, 5 to 1 days out. Also, do you think drinking 100 milliliters of vodka the night before the event would be beneficial? Thank you for your hard work. All right, most of this is pretty straightforward. These are methods that have been tried and true by tons of people. I know a lot of different coaches who give people advice on this, and a lot of them seem to actually give fairly similar advice. Now, one thing I'm going to mention, if you don't know what you're doing and you're still new to trying to do these things, don't mess with your sodium intake. Don't start manipulating electrolytes. It can go very, very badly for you. Number two, the thing that you need to remember, if you're drug-free, you're never going to look as full, anywhere near as full and tight as people utilizing drugs will when you're really lean and doing a photo shoot or something. You cannot replicate what they can pull off to get kind of that Photoshop shrink wrap look. It's just not going to happen. And in fact, even everyone on drugs doesn't experience that. A lot of people use very specific drugs the day of a photo shoot to achieve that look that not all of the drugs that they're using are going to do. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to replicate that look fully. But what I would recommend is that you need to cut your carbs back. Maybe even cut your protein back at least a week out, as far as maybe 10 days out before your photo shoot, and go ahead and increase your water intake a little bit. You want to start water loading when you get about 5 to 6 days out, but keep go on almost a ketogenic style diet as you're approaching it. That way you deplete muscle glycogen and you start dropping water weight. And then depending upon the person, you're going to need to experiment with this a little bit. Starting 1 to 2 days out, start adding simple carbs back in. And again, this is going to depend on the person, because some people will do a 24-hour carb up and they end up looking even better and fuller and tighter the next day afterwards. So you're going to need to experiment with this a little bit for yourself. If you want to play it safe though, starting 24 hours out, go ahead and reduce your water intake slightly, because you want to water load starting 5 days out, probably double your water intake. Go back to your normal water intake at that point. You don't want to come in and be really dry. And again, unless you've got a real expert coaching you on this in terms of the amount of water intake. But if you cut back to your normal water intake, maybe 16 to 24 hours out, you'll continue to urinate out the excess water that your body started doing by over drinking water for 5 days. And then you cut back to a normal healthy amount of water. You'll continue to, for up to 24 hours, keep excreting out the additional water that your body was used to taking in. So this makes this kind of a dry carb up. You need to keep your fiber really low, and you need to cut your fat down fairly moderate, because again, what you're going to have happen, anything that's going to upset your GI tract is going to cause it to bloat more inside your intestines and can cause some diarrhea, and then that in turn will mess with your fluid balance, cause cramping. So start adding simple sugars back in, simple carbs, things like white bread if you're not if you don't have celiacs or anything, white rice, rice cakes. Sugars, as long as they're lower fiber fruits, things like watermelon are probably okay. Again, some fruits, a little bit of even refined sugars is probably not a bad thing here. Go ahead and start loading in some refined sugars. If you want a slice of cake or some cookies, eat some. Just don't overload yourself to the point to where you're going to cause water swelling inside your GI tract, and you need to keep your dietary fiber really low. Again, you're trying to not bloat your gut up. You're trying to get fast enough digesting carbs that they're all going to your muscle tissue. And then, yeah, like you said, drinking some vodka the night before, or even up to 100 milliliters, a few shots. Some people might even do the full bottle. Drinking vodka the night before will help dehydrate you, and since you're eating all of these carbs, your muscles are going to supercompensate a little bit. So you're going to go ahead and fill back out, and it's going to suck extra subcutaneous water out. It's going to make you look fuller, tighter, and leaner than you are. It's a pretty straightforward process. Just don't be too extreme with it in any direction, so that you don't cause gastrointestinal upset, your stomach to bloat, or any sort of diarrhea or cramping. All right, next question. You said in your Ice Cream Fitness 5x5 video that if you aren't rowing 3 times a week, you're shortchanging your back development. Do you still take this stance? If so, why? Yeah, I still partially take this stance. I'm not saying you have to row, but what you see with a lot of full body programs out there, they have people alternating the row and the deadlift. I don't do that on the Ice Cream Fitness 5x5. And the reason is that while the deadlift absolutely does work your lats in large numbers of areas of your back, it doesn't do it as effectively, your lats particularly, as a row or a weighted chin up or a weighted pull up could. So you should be doing one of those 3 probably 3 times a week, unless you're not strong enough to do chin ups. or pull-ups, in which case lat pull-downs will suffice in the meantime, or even machine rows if that's all that you can do. But you need to be doing some sort of direct lat work 3 times a week in order to facilitate maximum back size. Again, this is for drug-free lifters, by the way, or very modest users, because otherwise you're simply not getting enough muscle protein synthesis uptime, and you're not going to maximize your back development. Again, a lot of these programs, you see things like, well, they're rotating through chest presses with overhead presses and stuff. Also, that's still working all of the chest and the delts and the triceps and everything, whereas in the back tends to get a little shortchanged on some of the full body programs that are out there. So ideally, yeah, you want to be doing some type of direct back work 3 days a week if you want to have the biggest lats possible. All right, next question. For an individual who has very little cardio endurance, what would your recommended program be to increase his endurance while still trying to run your novice program, and doing so without becoming so tired that it prevents you from weightlifting? Assuming no history of ever having high endurance, and assume muscle weakness is a factor in the problem, because every time I try to add in cardio, I end up stalling on my lifts and frying my CNS. That's probably because you're trying to increase your cardio too fast, or you're adding in higher intensity cardio, which is going to mess with a very high volume, very high workload program like my novice program, the 5x5. What I'm going to recommend is you start with just brisk walking. Just go start walking around the block for 15 minutes every single day, and slowly increase that over time till you can get to 30 minutes, or get on a bike and do some just list cardio, and again starting at about 15 minutes, and just over the course of a couple of weeks bringing that up to 30 minutes a day. That's how you get away with doing this sort of thing. And if you're doing any sort of interval training or high intensity cardio, and you're trying to run an aggressive program like my novice 5x5, of course it's going to start causing some stalling. But if you start with very mild cardio, if you have no endurance anyways, you're going to need to start with very mild cardio and just slowly work your way up over the time, over the days, the weeks, and the months. And that's how you avoid stalling on any sort of intense program like that. All right, next question. Training when injured. I've recently broken my finger, so any heavy back work is out. Luckily, I am cutting. Possible to not lose strength and size if I switch to 15 to 20 reps of lightweight, or should I forget it and squat more? Normally, I don't recommend those hooks. You'll notice that there are these straps that people put around the wrist that have hooks on them so that they can do all of their pulling without using their grip at all. Consider getting a pair of those. If you've got a broken finger or a broken hand and you still want to be able to pull fairly heavy, get some of those hooks, those grip hooks. That's a fantastic tool for this. I don't think they're a good idea for anything else, but they're definitely good for this. So go give that a try, and you don't need to go to 15 to 20 reps on all of your pulling exercises, because you might find in some cases that without any heavy work, you might start losing muscle mass in your back and everything as a result of doing that. But it really depends on the individual. But there's no need to make a drastic change like that. Again, you're cutting, you just need to maintain your strength. Go get some of those hooks and realize that once your finger heals, you're going to need to do a lot more grip work to get caught back up, because your grip strength is going to be shot. But that's okay. You've got an injury to deal with, so there's nothing you can do about that. So just get some of those hooks and do your normal back work, and maybe even cut everything down 5%. Because if you can maintain 95% of the normal weight you use on the bar while you're cutting, that should be sufficient to actually maintain your performance and your size, as long as you don't cut too aggressively. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I'm running your beginner program. If I miss a day, say I started Sunday morning as my Monday, then I train Tuesday but can't make it till Saturday, should I go on Saturday or just chalk it up as a deload and wait till Sunday again so I don't throw the whole next week off? Or is that just overthinking it? All right, when you're running any sort of program that you have structured weeks and blocks in, if you miss a day or a workout and have to delay it one day and you get everything shifted over one day, or you miss a whole workout and you have to shift the whole program over 2 days, you simply shift the whole program over 2 days. It doesn't matter what was considered to normally be your Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You'll simply have to change that. When what you were doing on Wednesdays now becomes your Friday workout. What you were doing on Fridays now becomes your Monday workout. You just shift it over accordingly. And actually, like my novice program runs on an A-B. It doesn't run on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You alternate workout A with workout B, with your new weights being determined by what you did the day before. So if you miss a B workout, you just do a B workout next time and then go back to A, B, A, B. Everything's just shifted over one day. So you're normally actually not even running. If you're running it 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's not a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's an A, B, A, B, A, B, so on and so forth. when you go to each week. So you're not really shifting anything. Just go to the B workout again. If you miss a B workout, then do a B workout again next time and just continue the program as normal and count the missed days as if they were just your day off, no matter how many of them there were. If there were 3 of them because you had to shift it over, then just go in as if they were your one day off and continue the program as normal. Pretty straightforward. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you've talked a lot about how when a drug-free lifter is stupid shredded, they look starved and flat. However, individuals on gear don't have this issue. Is it simply a matter of retaining less mass better? Does it work through another pathway involving fluid balance, etc.? It works through a couple different pathways. A big part of that is the fact that people retain muscle mass much, much better when they're using anabolics of any type. Let's just be realistic here. You are always going to lose some muscle mass when you are cutting very, very lean. It is unavoidable. So you're going to lose muscle. Even people on drugs sometimes lose some muscle if they get lean enough and they're big enough to where they don't, versus the amount of drugs they're using, they're going to tend to lose a little bit of muscle anyways. Even those guys do oftentimes, again, unless they're using hefty amounts or they're fairly new to their drugs, whatever. And the other factor there is going to be nutrient partitioning. It has to do with how well they store glycogen and glucose in their muscles. Drugs facilitate, many of the drugs, some to a greater and lesser extent than others. So again, you can't just lump everything into drugs or anabolics. It doesn't work that way. But some of them to a greater or lesser extent cause superior nutrient partitioning. They cause superior glycogen storage and even a shift in what fuel substrates you're burning. So someone who burns more fat and less carbs by default due to drugs they're on, who is also on a drug that causes their muscle tissue to store all excess glucose they eat immediately and store it in there, occasionally even burning it just off as fuel and heat, but storing everything that they eat in their muscle tissue, they are always going to look bigger and fuller on the same diet as someone who isn't on anything. And you're never going to be able to replicate that look that the drugs are able to give because they allow superior storage of glycogen for later to use as a fuel source than people who are in the normal hormone ranges. And so accordingly, they're going to tend to look thicker and fuller and rounder as a result of that. Now, is that a guarantee? No, because some of these drugs actually cause people to look flat and everything also because of the way that they work unless they add other drugs back in. Some people can actually still look flat and stringy while using anabolics and drugs purely because those drugs themselves cause a different effect than some others do, particularly some of the pure cutting drugs. So even that's not an absolute, but it comes down to one, better muscle retention, and 2, vastly superior nutrient partitioning and glycogen storage. And that latter is the biggest factor there and why people on drugs can look so much dramatically different when they're really ripped to people who are completely clean. All right, next question. Hey Jason, as stated in your recent video that said that 70 to 90% of diseases are caused by a person's lifestyle, does that study also apply to testicular cancer in young men where there are specific age ranges of when men can contract the disease? Thanks. Actually, that study, that meta-analysis showed that it was cancers specifically. It wasn't all diseases. It was just dealing with cancers in various types. The reason you're given a range there is because different types of cancers are going to be affected by these at different rates. That's why it was such a broad range of saying 70 to 90 because it varies a lot. And I didn't see the specifics on individual cancers. You'll need to look into the full research yourself to see which cancers are 90%, which cancers seem to be closer to 70%, so that you can get a better idea yourself. As far as testicular cancer goes, obviously there can be lifestyle factors involved. People who weight train, for example, tend to get all cancers at a much, much lower rate. So that would include testicular cancer. I would suggest that the reason you see some young men getting testicular cancer so often who lift weights is probably, again, due to the much higher chance that guys who lift weights are going to use various androgens and anabolics, which could absolutely be a factor in testicular cancer, combined with the propensity for eating excessive amounts of food. A lot of bulking and cutting and going back to bulking all the time can actually increase cancer rates also. It's generally going to be pretty well offset by the weight training, but just repeatedly bulking and forcing yourself to gain pretty significant amounts of weights due to all the additional IGF-1 that's going to be elevated as a result of it could, in theory, be a big factor in people getting cancer. So these could actually be factors in, say, Furious Pete's testicular cancer, which I think people or interested in on YouTube because he is a famous YouTuber who got it, I'm sure that both are probably factors. It could have been a drug use factor, and his eating challenges could have both contributed. Are they probably the only causes? Probably not. But are they most likely contributing factors? Sure. All right, next question. If a drug-free lifter is trying to utilize the Bulgarian Light style of training for strength, what kind of sets and reps should be spent on a given exercise? All right, that one's pretty easy. You shouldn't be doing very much volume at all. If you're trying to do Bulgarian Light as a completely drug-free lifter, all of your big lifts, you need to come in and hit a training max. When you train, which means one rep at around 90% max, or at 9 out of 10 on the rate of perceived exertion scale. Basically the heaviest weight you can do for a single while still maintaining perfect form and fast bar speed. And then on days to where you're feeling stronger, particularly on your big lifts, you can do a back off set of 3 reps with around 85% of your max. So a single followed by a single back off triple. And you could probably do that every workout if you're only doing it 4 days a week. But if you start pushing it out to the 6th day a week and you're doing like a squatting every day, for example, you might want to limit those back off sets to just days where you're feeling your strongest and able to perform them. So maybe your strongest 3 days that week. And you could follow that same protocol for everything. And again, I would recommend if you're going to do any accessory work, staying with maybe one set in the 5 to 10 rep range. So let's say you're doing some overhead pressing or rows or weighted chin-ups or whatever you happen to be doing for some extra accessory work to put on size. I would limit those to maybe one set of 5 to 10 reps. But all the big lifts that you're trying to train the motor patterns on, again, one single followed by, on the days you feel strongest, a back off triple. That's generally what you're going to find works best to not bury yourself while doing pretty much very high frequency training max squatting like Bulgarian Light. All right, next question and last question of the week. How do you stay sexy with all the hate thrown your way? That's a great question because I do get a tremendous amount of hate thrown my way, but at the same time, I still seem to maintain my sexy. And a lot of people would tell you that sexy is all in your mind, that it's just mindset. And while there is some truth to that, I'm going to say the truth is sexy for a man is really in your beard. I maintain my sexy with all the hate that's thrown my way by using a good beard oil. These days I'm using a brand called Woody's. And I have some other stuff, but I really like the Woody's lately. I find that the beard oil, when I get it worked into my beard good, combing out and everything, that it gives my beard that luxurious, sexy look that just exudes sexiness in general. And that is what helps me maintain my sexy, is keeping my beard luxurious and slick and full with a good beard oil. Works wonders for maintaining your sexy when you're under any sort of stress, catching hate, anything else. Because if your beard is sexy and you're a man, you're going to exude sexiness. There's just no way to avoid it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blahas here, and I'm a little bit hoarse today, so hopefully I'll be able to finish these Q&As. But let's go ahead and knock this out. First question. I'm currently running Grayskull LP with frequency method, chins, and push-ups. What do you think of the program? Also, I want to substitute the overhead press for a push press after watching you talk about it. Is this fine, even though the last 3x5 set is AMRAP? AMRAP meaning as many reps as possible. Now to your first question, I don't really remember. I've been asked a few times about Grayskull LP, but when I remember looking at it, and I might be wrong here, it just seemed kind of complicated. I didn't really want to look that far into a program like that, particularly one that other people are putting out when I can just put out simpler programs to do the same thing for most of you guys. But as far as the substituting of push press for an overhead press, I would say in just about any program, it isn't unreasonable to take the strict overhead press and substitute it for a push press, like bring the push press in. However, I will add the caveat that any program that has any high volume of squatting in it, you might want to reduce the squatting volume slightly to compensate. So say, for example, you're running a 5x5, but you want to substitute in your overhead press with the push press. You might want to cut the volume down, cut a set or two out of the actual squats in such a program so that you end up only doing about 9 to 12 sets of squats a week instead of 15 on a traditional 5x5, just using that as an example, because you're getting additional leg explosive training in your quads, glutes, everything else from the push press. And so you might end up really pushing too hard on all of that, doing too much volume, more than you actually need, and it might not be to your best interest. So you might want to reduce squat volume slightly on any program where you're going to switch those out, because you're getting some overlap there already, and therefore you can mitigate the need for doing the higher volumes of squat that you might be doing. Again, just depends on the program. All right, next question. Would you ever work up to a single at 90 to 95% in the gym if just one tendon is problematic due to overuse? If not, what weight volume ranges would you prefer? All right, I'm going to be frank with you here and say that if you have any tendon in your body that is painful or hurts due to overuse, you need to deload. You need to deload every exercise that puts stress on that tendon, and you need to continue to deload for as long as it takes for that pain to go away. So I'd like to see you reduce your weights by 50%. So if on exercises you're doing 200 pounds, you need to cut down to 100 pounds. Do not put any significant stress on a tendon that is sore from overuse, and I can't stress that enough. That is how I snapped one before. That is how many guys out there have snapped tendons. If a tendon is sore, you have to deload, and there's no excuse to do otherwise. So what would my rep and set scheme be? Well, if you're doing 3 sets of 5 with 200 pounds, you cut down to 2 sets of 5 with 100 pounds on every exercise that's in that scheme that's affecting that tendon. You can't afford to put stress on it. It's the only option you have. And I know you're probably saying, well, this seems to be long term. Yeah, it's long term, which means you're going to injure yourself if you continue to push it. And if it takes you a month of deloading any of those muscles, let's say it's the bicep, you're going to need to deload your deadlifts, you're going to need to deload your chin-ups, you're going to need to deload your curls. And you have to look at it this way: a month of reduced progress or no progress due to the deload, or maybe even a slight reduction, some slightly backwards progress, you lose a month of progress. That is better than snapping the tendon, having to have surgery, and losing 6 months of progress or a year of progress. It's a far better alternative. You have to learn to listen to your body, and when these things are hurting, don't keep pushing. And especially you guys who are doing this for recreation, you're not a competitive athlete, you're not making a living doing this. Why subject yourself to those sort of risks that are going to require you to have surgeries and could potentially ruin your lifting for the rest of your life? And even if you do compete, you're going to put your career short. You could possibly end your career by doing this. So just think on that. All right, next question. Hey Jason, what is your opinion on stomach vacuums? Do you think this is an effective exercise, and would you recommend them? Thanks. Yes, I think the stomach vacuum is an effective exercise. In fact, it is one of the few exercises that allows you to directly work the transverse abdominis very effectively. Furthermore, because of the potential of this exercise to help a person suck their gut in even when they're not training, those of you guys who are out there chasing aesthetics, particularly that classic 1960s aesthetic look, this is something you should probably be doing. All of those guys did it back in that day, and that's one of the reasons they tended to have kind of a sucked in gut look and a smaller waistline, is because of this exercise. It was something used very heavily by everyone from the Bill Pearl era and Larry Scott up to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Frank Zane. A lot of these guys utilize this exercise every single day. So you guys chasing this whole aesthetic thing, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of, but if you're chasing it, this was, for that era, that look, this exercise was considered to be critical by these guys, and they did not consider it to be optional. It's something they did every single day. All right, next question. Is there any benefit to reverse dieting after a cut? I know you said that it was a marketing ploy so that coaches could squeeze another 4 to 6 weeks out of you post-contest, but is there anything to be said for a hungry metabolism, for want of a better word, whereby your body has been in a caloric-deprived state for X amount of weeks and thus acts as a sponge to quickly accrue those precious adipose stores vital for times of famine? You are absolutely correct when you say that I believe reverse dieting is nothing more than a ploy created by coaches to sell ebooks and coaching services. It doesn't have a benefit out of psychologically helping some people who have body image disorders not freak out when they regain water weight after they do a competition. As far as this other question goes about your adipose tissue acting like a sponge, it does that all the time. Whether you've dieted or not is irrelevant. It's just that after you've dieted a long time, you get hungrier. So you eat faster and you seem like you gain fat more quickly because you regain water weight quickly. Anytime you're in a caloric deficit, you also lose water weight that will return pretty quickly. And a lot of times people who have gotten ultra ripped have lost 10 or 15 pounds of water weight, and that can come back very, very fast. But yeah, the human body is designed to survive famines. Your body will always soak up extra calories easily into your adipose tissue given an opportunity. This doesn't change it. It's always like that. And the other factor that you need to consider there is that when many people do these cuts, they've taken themselves to a body fat level that is unhealthy to be at. And because let's say they've done some sort of contest prep that's 16 or 20 weeks long, they may have been at an unhealthy body fat percentage the final 6 weeks of it. You don't need to stay at that any longer. Those people, if they wanted to walk around looking ripped, get photos or whatever, they had a 6-week window to get that done. If they care about their health or their fitness at all, they need to listen to their body. Their body's telling them that they need to regain body fat, that they need to regain weight for their overall health purposes. Your body knows this at this point. It knows it is in danger of starving. It knows that you are harming it. So yes, it's going to want you to eat more. Well, go ahead and regain some body fat. Stop worrying about this, because you're going to hurt yourself in the long term by maintaining far too lean of a body fat percentage when you had all the opportunities you needed to get photos and everything done during that 6 weeks and the few days after whatever your competition was. There's no point in a person maintaining that long term. It can only hurt you. Listen to your body and put yourself back up to a reasonable, healthy body fat percentage, which is going to be for men like 10%, for women about 19 or 20%. Don't try to stay that lean. Just listen to your body. It actually knows what's best in this case. Don't do these things long term. It's just going to hurt you. All right, next question. Any tips on how to combine powerlifting with MMA without interfering with each other? I powerlift 4 times a week, and I plan to train for MMA 3 times a week, and maybe try some amateur fights in the future, although powerlifting remains priority. Also, should I do MMA the same day as I lift weights? Lifting obviously first, or on different days? There's nothing wrong with doing physical activity every single day, particularly if they tax completely different energy systems. I'm going to recommend that you powerlift the 4 days a week and do your MMA 3 days a week. And as you get more involved in the MMA, you might want to consider cutting the powerlifting back to 3 days. There's no reason you can't get brutally strong and even compete in powerlifting on a 3-day-a-week schedule if you had to. And that will allow you a lot more recovery time and adaptation for the MMA, so that they interfere even less, so that you get maybe even a full day off every week. Particularly, again, with such a high frequency of powerlifting training at 4 days a week. The 3 days might be better in the long term as you get more into it. Now, as far as them not interfering as well, you need to keep them into separate seasons, meaning don't do a powerlifting meet within a month of an MMA match. What I'm going to recommend is you break them up. So what you might want to do, if you're going to do an MMA match, a couple of amateur fights, you might want to back off on your power training, reduce all your weights down about 5%, cut back to just maintaining, maybe even cut back to powerlifting just twice a week for the final 4 to 6 weeks before a fight, so that you can maintain your strength and power, focus more on your conditioning and more on your technique work and sport specific work for what you're doing. And that way you aren't going to have the powerlifting training interfere with your body's adaptation and learning patterns for the peaking for the fight. And then take a month off from the MMA training, other than just the really basic stuff. If you've got a powerlifting meet coming up, do the same thing. The final 4 to 6 weeks before any powerlifting meet, your MMA needs to go on a back burner. You need to just keep it very, very light, very rudimentary, and just keep your skills up so that you can focus on peaking for a meet. Because remember, when it comes to some of this stuff, you can cross train, you can train for multiple disciplines, multiple sports endeavors. But just remember, when it comes time to actually compete, you need to put all of your focus into one, and the other has to actually regress a little bit, ideally to allow yourself to peak for the competition, because you don't want to be a jack of all trades and master of none. All right, next question. Hello, Jason. I'm a big fan of your linear periodization strength program. My maxes have increased to 230 kilo deadlift, 180 kilo squat, and 110 kilo bench press at 75 kilos body weight. That's actually not bad at all. My question is, in your program, what would be the most efficient accessory movement to add into this program for overall hypertrophy and muscular development for areas such as arms, back, traps, shoulders, without impeding recovery, since the main compounds already fatigue me quite considerably before moving into accessories? Many thanks. Good question. And what you need to remember is that the linear periodization program is already a very comprehensive program. The main lifts are going to fatigue you a lot. And so by the time you get to the accessory movements, you're not going to have a tremendous amount of strength left. So all you're trying to do is create a little bit of metabolic fatigue in your weak points. Just for overall shoulders and arms, I might recommend that you stick with just a couple of extra movements, maybe some chin-ups, just straight body weight chin-ups, not weighted, given the difficulty that's already being put on your back and everything, just the stress that's put on it in this program. Chin-ups with just your body weight and some face pulls will probably finish all of that out. They'll help finish off your shoulders. They'll work the side and posterior heads of your deltoids, your traps further, your rotator cuffs. The chin-ups will help with your arms, upper back, everything. That should go ahead and help hit any of those weaknesses that you're concerned with without overly fatiguing you. So that's what I would recommend you do for your specific application. The things that you're wanting to bring up more, definitely just body weight chin-ups and face pulls should work wonders for you there. All right, next question. Are weighted dips in the 5x5 / 3x5 range following a similar progression an acceptable substitute for benching? Would you say a dip is more specific for MMA and boxing, ignoring the push press for a moment, if they only had the choice to do one or the other? Is it an acceptable substitute in that situation? Yes, absolutely. The bench press can be cut out and be replaced with dips for overall athleticism and size and strength, as long as you're not playing American football, you are not competing in powerlifting, and you're not a younger guy who is concerned about guys asking him how much he benches. Again, that's one of the reasons I always keep the bench press in programs. It's very, very important, seems like, in young men in gym culture to be able to prove that they have a strong bench press to others. And if you're not doing the bench press, you can't do that as often. And I know it's a silly point, but it's a big deal to a lot of people. So I take that into account when I write programs. But for someone who's purely doing MMA and boxing, yeah, they're absolutely interchangeable. And can you do weighted dips in a 5x5 or 3x5 successfully for this? Yes, you can, absolutely. Just be very, very careful with always training through the same range of motion so that you don't injure yourself, and paying attention for injuries, making sure you don't get intersternal pain, making sure you don't dip so low on the dips that you hurt your rotator cuffs and your shoulders. That's just things you need to be aware of when you start doing heavy work like that in sets of 5 on dips. Be very, very aware of those things, and take precautions, and always be ready to catch yourself at the bottom so you don't dip too low with the little stands down there for your feet. And again, just listen to your body. But in terms of overall athleticism for contact sports or combat sports, yeah, I think that the weighted dip can totally replace the bench press in that situation very successfully. But as you mentioned, push presses, make sure you do those. All right, next question. What are your thoughts in regards to training modalities for older individuals, 60 and older? Would you recommend they do mostly body weight, free weight resistance type training, machines, hammer strength where it is near unilateral movements, or a mixture of all three? As far as machines go, the only role I'm going to see for machines for older individuals is when they're still in the learning phase and you need to just rebuild some basic muscle and some basic bone density until you can get their core and their stabilizers strong enough to do real resistance training. And then once you're able to do that, I would cut the machines out completely. They're older people. They really need more functional motor patterns. They need to make sure that most of what they're doing works their full body. They need to improve bone density. They need to improve joint health. There's a lot of things they need to work on, and these are the way that they're going to do that. This is how they'll keep from hurting their joints and everything, by balancing everything using big, heavy compound movements. And obviously, you don't want them to do really heavy weights. 60 and older individuals shouldn't be working above, in my opinion, about 70 to 75% intensity for the most part. But they need to be working on, again, heavy barbell work. Again, I'm calling it heavy, but it's really not in that case. But big compound movements with barbells, body weight movements, definitely if they're strong enough to do them with ease, body weight movements with added resistance later. But as far as machines go, no, the machines and even isolation work are not really what you want for these older individuals. It's not going to help them rebuild the base that you really want to rebuild in them, particularly to protect their joints, their connective tissue, bone density, all of that stuff. You got to remember, in older individuals, you're looking at overall health a lot more than younger kids in the gym who are just concerned with appearance. Older individuals really have serious concerns and aging related issues that they're trying to reverse. And it's not just about muscle mass, it actually is about balancing muscle around joints, connective tissue, bone density, turning around bone demineralization. All of that stuff is very, very critical for these people. And big barbell movements and body weight movements that, again, utilize the whole body as much as possible is going to give them the most bang for their buck. All right, next question. When structuring a Bulgarian light program 4 to 5 times a week, do you see any problem with the drop back sets being in the higher end, say 3 by 10? If not, how would you maximize leg hypertrophy within the program? All right, I want to answer this as delicately as possible without coming across as kind of an asshole here, but I don't know what else to say other than, in what world do you think doing 3 sets of 10 after a training max on squats 5 days a week is a good idea? But you've got to understand that you're going to chronically overreach on this very, very fast. And I'm talking within 2 to 3 weeks. This is absolutely not acceptable. The back off sets that you do in Bulgarian are not usually even multiple sets. They're 1 to 2 sets with very, very low reps and a similar rep range to what you use. Like if you hit your training max on your squat 5 days a week, which is around 90% of your competition max, or what you expect to do in a comp or in a meet, and you do 1 or 2 back off sets of around 3 reps with something like 85% intensity. So it shouldn't be anywhere near trying to induce metabolic fatigue. And why would you need to induce metabolic fatigue? If you come in 5 days a week on the barbell squat and you're doing a training max followed by a back off set for just a little tiny hair of metabolic fatigue, but you're doing it 5 days a week, your legs are going to grow tremendously. You don't need additional hypertrophy work at that point. And I think you need to brush up on some stuff I know Dr. Mike Israetel has wrote about. He himself is a kinesiology professor who also competes in bodybuilding and BJJ, who he breaks a lot of this down of why mixing large differences in rep ranges for the same lifts or same body parts in the same workout is actually counterproductive. It will give you slower progress than if you train those rep ranges on separate days, because they will interfere with each other. They'll interfere with recovery patterns in the long term, and you'll find it more difficult. So no, I would never recommend that someone hit a training max and do back off sets of 10 immediately afterwards. And I certainly would never recommend that anyone do 3 sets of 10 on any big compound movement while doing Bulgarian light. It is absolutely going to be a failure for you. It's not going to work the way that you think it will. You're going to bury yourself and you're not going to make the program work. Running a standard Bulgarian light program is fatiguing enough without doing a bunch of metabolic fatigue work. All right, next question. Jason, being 20 years old, and I assume most of your viewers are around my age, do you think we could get away with fewer deloads, say, every 12 weeks and still make gains? Actually, you did kind of assume wrong there, but that's okay. I look very, very closely at all my Google Analytics pretty much every month. I go through everything and check everything, and no, actually, people ranged 18 to 25 only comprise around a third of my total audience, around maybe 35, 36%. At least this year, I actually have a much older audience than most fitness YouTubers on average. My average is a little higher in terms of age. A big chunk of my guys are 25 to 35. But I still don't mind giving a lot of advice to you guys in that 20-ish range, because you're still a good third of my audience, and I can't neglect you. But to answer that question, yeah, guys in their 20s can get away with fewer deloads. You can probably go 12 weeks without deloading. Guys in their 30s shouldn't be doing that. But guys who are 20-ish, probably, as long as you're not pushing it to the absolute limits, you can probably go 12 weeks. But I will add the caveat there that you still need to listen to your body. You need to watch for signs of overreaching. You need to watch for signs of inflamed connective tissue, because that will bury you no matter what. It doesn't matter how old you are or what drugs you're on. If you continue to push and do not deload, when you start getting inflamed connective tissue somewhere or tendons that hurt, you are absolutely asking to go to Snap City. You're asking to be injured and to rip a tendon or you potentially even rip a tendon off the bone and need surgery for that muscle and that limb or that part of your body to work properly again. So you need to be paying attention to those things and deload no matter what. Even if I say, hey, a 20-year-old can probably get away with 12 weeks, and at week 6 your left bicep tendon or your left triceps tendon starts to hurt, you need to deload anyways. Absolutely listen to those things. All right, next question and last question of the week. All right, guys, and this is a personal question, so it's an off-topic question, and if you're not interested in these, feel free to go ahead and bow on out. But here's the question. You've previously said that you've never really had a problem with attracting women. However, see a lot of my funny friends getting absolutely nowhere, sometimes including myself. Is some people just naturally attractive without having to do anything at all? What's your opinion and experiences? Is there something a person could do to change this? Alright, as much as the trolls and other people might not want to admit it, I clearly have two ex-wives and I have a current girlfriend who is very heavily involved in my life. Now, you guys argue oftentimes about how hot she is or not. There seems to be a mixed consensus depending on who you ask, but the point is I clearly do get girls. It's not really been a problem for me. So, what would I say you're possibly doing wrong here? You're trying too hard. You're absolutely trying too hard. And I don't mean that you shouldn't let a woman know you're interested once you have her attention. The worst thing you can do is to not let her know exactly what your interests are and make those very clear very early on. But if you're trying to just attract them in a social setting or a gathering, the worst thing that you can do is walk in there with the intention that you're there to try to attract women and chase women. That actually will put out a signal that makes you come across as desperate or trying too hard. The absolute best thing you can do, what I mean by the funny guys, the funniest guys I've ever known who just attract women actually are just naturally funny and hilarious, and they just love having a good time. They actually don't even really care at the end of the day if a girl leaves with them or not, because they're basically the way one of my cousin, who was the funniest guy I knew, who got laid all the time despite being the exact opposite of attractive. He was hilarious and told jokes all the time, even when it was just guys. When he went to any sort of party or social setting, he just wanted to party and have a good time and party his ass off and live it up and have fun and make everybody around him laugh. And the way he worded it was that I don't care if maybe there's a girl I saw and liked across the room, but I'm not going to waste my time chasing her, because if I'm just funny enough and I have a good enough time, eventually some girl's going to throw herself at me anyways. I'm going to get one of them and maybe two or three of them, and I'll just pick the one that I want, because they'll come to me if I'm just chilling and having a good time. I don't need to go pursue them, and maybe I might not get the one I want, but eventually a hot one is going to hit on me. So at the end of the day, it's all good. It's just numbers, man. And I think his attitude, it worked very, very well. And that's really all you kind of have to do. Women like that. They like the guy who's just having a good time, who's not there specifically chasing them, trying to get in their panties. The guy who's just having fun is fun to be around, purely because of the fact that he is enjoying himself and he is happy and he's just chilling and doing his thing. That actually makes him attractive, because he's just fun to be around, because he's having fun. It makes it completely unawkward for them and natural to just be around that person. So they're going to be drawn to them. And if you're out there trying, instead of just going into a social setting because you genuinely want to be there and you just want to have a good time, again, will make you reek of desperation. And nothing puts women off faster than desperation. Someone who's just confident and having fun is actually fun to be around. And if you're fun to be around, women will want to be around you in general. It's pretty straightforward. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.